date is March 20th, 1994, and Wrestlemania 10 is being held at Madison Square Garden. The lights dim and a hush falls over the crowd. The anticipation is suddenly palpable as the audience anxiously awaits the arrival of one of the most iconic figures in professional wrestling history. Finally, the unmistakable introduction of his Scarface-inspired theme song echoes through the arena, and the crowd erupts. With a swagger that oozes confidence and machismo, he makes his way to the ring, adorned in his signature gold chains and a toothpick dangling from his mouth. Here is Razor Ramon in his moment of glory, taking part in a ladder match against Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental Championship, a bout that is still revered as one of the greatest matches of all time. But who was the man behind the character, and how did this crowd-favorite villain rise to such legendary status? Scott Oliver Hall was born on October 20th, 1958, in St. Mary's County, Maryland. Growing up in a military family, Hall's childhood was one of constant movement and instability. His father, a career Army officer, moved the family frequently, and young Scott found solace in sports, excelling particularly in wrestling and football. These early experiences instilled in him a resilience that would later define his wrestling career. But even before he ever set foot within the squared circle, Hall found himself in some precarious situations. Most notably, in 1983, following an altercation outside a nightclub in Orlando, Florida, Hall wrestled a gun away from a man and subsequently shot him in the head with his own weapon. Hall claimed it was an act of self-defense, and the charges of second-degree murder were eventually dropped due to insufficient evidence. Hall's journey into professional wrestling began the next year in 1984. He started his career in the National Wrestling Alliance, where he wrestled under various monikers, including Starship Coyote. Hall then joined the American Wrestling Association in 1985, where he appeared as Magnum Scott Hall. Soon, Hall formed a tag team with his experienced friend Curt Hennig, whom he later credited for shaping his early wrestling career. On January 18, 1986, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, they defeated Jimmy Garvin and Steve Regal for the AWA World Tag Team Championship in a grueling 58-minute match. But Hall had his eyes set on bigger and better promotions, most notably the World Wrestling Federation. But despite his best efforts during two tryout opportunities in 1987 and 1990, Hall came up short, and this landed him in World Championship Wrestling, which he joined in 1989. His pay-per-view debut was at the Great American Bash, participating in a King of the Hill Battle Royal. He then appeared regularly as a jobber, losing to the Great Muta, Mike Rotunda, Sid Vicious, Ron Simmons, and Butch Reed. Hall then spent a year wrestling under the New Japan Pro Wrestling promotion, as well as a brief run in the Puerto Rican promotion World Wrestling Council. In 1991, he officially returned to WCW as the Diamond Stud, a persona reminiscent of Rick Rude's, characterized by arrogance and vanity. Like Rude, he would invite attractive women from the audience into the ring. Managed by Diamond Dallas Page, Hall made his first appearance under this new gimmick on May 19th at Super Brawl. During his tenure as the Diamond Stud, Hall introduced his trademark toothpicks and began his iconic practice of flinging them at television cameras. The next year, in 1992, Hall's ambition culminated in his joining the World Wrestling Federation as Razor Ramon, a character embodying a shady yet stylish Cuban-American bully from Miami. The character was modeled after Tony Montana and Manny Rivera from the 1983 film Scarface. Razor Ramon's nickname, the Bad Guy, and his catchphrase,
"Say hello to the bad guy,"
were inspired by Montana's iconic lines.
Say hello to my little friend! So say goodnight to the bad guy!
Razor Ramon made his in-ring debut on the August 8th, 1992 episode of Superstars, where he defeated jobber Paul Van Dale with his finishing move, the Razor's Edge. This move was formerly known as the Diamond Death Drop during his time in WCW. As Razor handed his large gold chain necklaces to an attendant at ringside, he would threaten, "If something happens to this, something's gonna happen to you," before flicking his toothpick at the attendant. Razor's first major storyline kicked off when he interfered in a championship match between Randy Savage and Ric Flair. Razor attacked Savage on the floor, allowing Flair to win the title. This interference sparked a feud between Razor and Savage, which later involved the Ultimate Warrior when he saved Savage from a post-match assault by Razor. At Survivor Series, Razor and Flair were set to face Savage and Warrior, but Warrior was fired before the event and replaced by Mr. Perfect. In the match, Razor and Flair lost to Savage and Perfect by disqualification due to their persistent double teaming. Soon thereafter, WWF champion Bret Hart was set to defend his title against the Ultimate Warrior at the Royal Rumble, but Razor Ramon stepped in after Warrior left the company. During their feud, Razor verbally disrespected Hart and the Hart family. At the Royal Rumble, Razor lost to Hart, submitting to the sharpshooter, but he had another golden opportunity on the October 4th, 1993 episode of Monday Night Raw, where a 20-man battle royal would determine who would compete the following week for the vacant WWF Intercontinental Championship. Razor Ramon and Rick Martel emerged as the last two competitors, and the following week on Raw, Razor defeated Martel with a razor's edge to win the Intercontinental Championship. Razor then entered into a feud with Shawn Michaels regarding who had the legitimate claim to the Intercontinental Championship. Michaels had been stripped of the title months earlier due to inactivity, though he was actually suspended at the time. Upon his return, Michaels appeared with his own version of the belt, asserting that he was still the champion since he hadn't been defeated for it. The dispute was resolved when Razor defeated Michaels in a ladder match at Wrestlemania 10, retrieving both belts to become the undisputed Intercontinental Champion. This was a brutal, high-flying spectacle that pushed both men to their limits. The match was widely acclaimed and earned the 1994 Match of the Year title from readers of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And then in 1995, Razor defeated Jeff Jarrett in another ladder match to win his third WWF Intercontinental Championship, making Razor Ramon the first wrestler to win the Intercontinental title 3 times. Hall had reached the pinnacle of professional wrestling, earning the respect and admiration of fans and peers alike. But behind the charismatic persona of Razor Ramon was a man struggling with personal demons. In 1996, Razor was set to face Goldust in a rematch for the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania 12 in a Miami street fight. However, Hall was suspended by the WWF for 6 weeks due to drug use, leading to the match being scrapped. Rumors soon spread that the WWF would protect the Razor Ramon character as its own intellectual property. This became reality in September 1996, when Rick Bognar took on the role as part of a revenge storyline, with the return of Razor Ramon being revealed by a frustrated Jim Ross. In 1996, Scott Hall made the move to World Championship Wrestling, where he became a founding member of the New World Order alongside Kevin Nash and Hulk Hogan. The NWO storyline was revolutionary, blurring the lines between good and evil and injecting new life into WCW. Hall's character was instrumental in WCW's success during the Monday Night Wars. Yet despite his professional success with the NWO, Hall's personal issues continued to escalate. His addiction problems led to numerous stints in rehab, and his wife ultimately divorced him in 1998 due to his drug use. That same year, Hall was arrested for groping a 56-year-old woman outside a hotel in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. His struggles with drugs and alcohol soon became well known and were even woven into a controversial WCW storyline. Ironically, during this period, Hall was arrested for keying a limousine while intoxicated outside a nightclub in Orlando, Florida, causing $2,000 in damage. By the early 2000s, Hall's wrestling career was marred by his ongoing struggles with addiction. He made sporadic appearances in various wrestling promotions, including a brief return to WWE, but his battles outside the ring overshadowed his in-ring achievements. On October 10, 2008, Hall, who was apparently inebriated, was arrested at a roast for the Iron Sheik at a Crowne Plaza hotel in New Jersey. After comedian Jimmy Graham made a joke about Owen Hart's death, Hall, outraged, charged at Graham, knocked over a lectern, grabbed the microphone, and condemned the joke as disrespectful. After leaving TNA in 2010, Hall entered rehab funded by WWE and checked out in early October. Shortly after, he had a defibrillator and pacemaker implanted. That year, he was hospitalized twice for double pneumonia, began experiencing seizures, and was diagnosed with epilepsy, requiring 11 daily medications for his heart and seizure issues. In May of 2010, Hall was arrested and charged with disorderly conduct and resisting arrest after police were called to the Hitching Post bar in the Orlando area, when Hall became aggressive after reported heavy drinking. On April 6, 2011, Hall was hospitalized following a seizure. Medical reports indicated he had overdosed on both opioids and benzodiazepines. Then, exactly 1 year later, on April 6, 2012, Hall was arrested in Chillicothe, Florida, for a domestic disturbance involving his girlfriend, Lisa Howell. He was reportedly drunk and accused of choking Howell. Longtime friend Kevin Nash believed that Hall's substance abuse stemmed from post-traumatic stress disorder caused by the 1983 incident where Hall had to use an assailant's gun against him in self-defense. There was a glimmer of hope in 2013 when Hall's longtime friend and fellow wrestler Diamond Dallas Page stepped in, offering Hall a place in his recovery program. Through Page's guidance and support, Hall began to turn his life around. He worked tirelessly to overcome his addictions, and his efforts paid off. In 2014, Scott Hall was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, a moment of redemption and recognition for his contributions to professional wrestling. Hall stood before his peers and fans, acknowledging his past mistakes and expressing gratitude for the second chance he had been given. But despite the highs of his Hall of Fame induction, Scott Hall's battle with addiction was a lifelong struggle. In the years that followed, he faced numerous health challenges, and his past demons continued to haunt him. In March 2022, Hall was hospitalized after breaking his hip and being found days later by his friend Dallas Page. Following hip replacement surgery, he suffered 3 heart attacks due to a blood clot and was placed on life support at Wellstar Kennestone Hospital in Marietta, Georgia. Hall was taken off life support on March 14, 2022, and passed away a few hours later at the age of 63. 4 days after Hall's death, Sean Waltman disclosed that Hall had relapsed into alcohol abuse during the pandemic lockdowns. The man who had entertained millions as Razor Ramon was gone, leaving behind a legacy that would never be forgotten. Scott Hall's story is one of triumph and tragedy, a tale of a man who reached the heights of professional wrestling but was ultimately undone by his personal demons. As Razor Ramon, he captivated audiences with his charisma, talent, and larger-than-life persona. As Scott Hall, he faced struggles that many could relate to, fighting battles that extended far beyond the wrestling ring. Razor Ramon's influence on professional wrestling is undeniable. His character revolutionized the industry, setting a new standard for what a villain could be. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing for more in-depth stories from the world of professional wrestling. Until next time, take care and remember, hard work pays off and dreams come true. Bad times don't last, but bad guys do.